Hi, this is Simon Upstall and welcome to another tutorial for Apple Motion, and today we're going to be taking a look at creating this music visualizer. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to build the basic element that is going to be used for the entire project. And to do that, I'm going to make a new project that is a little bit unusual in dimensions. So it's going to be 20 wide and 400 high. And I've got 24 frames a second, and I'm going to make it 30 seconds long. So now we've got this long, thin project. And into this group, I'm going to bring generators Cellular. And really, we're not going to do a great deal with this. I think we're just going to increase that speed to 1.5. So we've got that sort of movement there. And this is literally going to be it. And we're going to render this out so we can use it as an element. So we'll come to Share, Export Movie. We can make this just ProRes proxy. That'll be absolutely fine for this. And we can render it out to our assets folder, and let's call it element. So having done that, we can close this project. I mean, you can save it if you want, but I'm just going to close it because it's very simple, easily enough to be remade. And I've made a new project, and this is going to be 1920 1080, 24 frames a second, and 30 seconds long. So the first thing we're going to do is import that element asset, bring that in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a replicator out of this. So object replicate, or you could hit L on the keyboard. So the shape we're going to use is wave, and that's going to be the basis of the whole thing. And we're going to have an X start point of -960, X end point of +960. And let's have 90 points. And then we'll fix some of this stuff later on, but we'll come down and look at the scale down here. So what I want is I want some scale randomness. So I'm going to go for a Y scale randomness of 200. And then let's open up the main scale and let's just reduce that X scale down quite a bit. We just want sort of thin lines like that. I think that's going to do where we are at. We're about, let's go for 20 like that. And then obviously we've got a repeated pattern. So to avoid that repeated pattern, we're going to click on random start frames. And now they're all different. I'll turn off the overlays. We've got that nice sort of liquid movement from the Cellular. So what I want to do next is to import my drum loop audio. And there it is there. Command 9 brings up the timeline for that. We don't need to see that, so close that down. Okay, so we're going to use that to drive two different things. The first of which is going to be the phase. So I'm going to right-click on the phase, add parameter behavior audio, and from the drop-down menu, we'll select my drum loop. And that'll take a little moment to analyze that. So there we go. And what I'm going to do is increase that scale to 5. And then we can see the effect of that. Is to get those bouncing to the track. So I've renamed that audio behavior as audio phase because we're going to add an extra one. Now there's one thing I want to do before we go much further, and that's to come back to my element and change its anchor point. So if we come to the anchor point, the Y anchor point, I'm going to set that to -200. So it sits at the bottom. And you'll see now we've got them all sort of nicely lined up on the base of the wave. So then what we're going to do is we're going to add another audio behavior, and we're going to add it to the amplitude. So right click, add parameter behavior audio. Again, we're going to select from the drop down our drum loop. Again, it's going to take a few seconds to analyze that. And then we want to increase the scale very considerably. So I'm going to go for 200 just to get us started. And now you'll see that the wave amplitude is being driven by the audio as well, and that's looking pretty nice. So I've renamed that as audio amplitude. So we want to do a couple of other things here. We want a little bit more detail in the wave. So what we're going to do is increase the frequency from 1 to 3, and now we've got that. The other thing I want to do is I don't want any amplitude right at the beginning. So what I want to do is I'm going to come to, so my track is at 120 BPM, and so we've got nice bar lengths that are just 4 seconds long, which makes it all quite easy. So I'm going to come to 12 seconds, and I'm going to set a keyframe for the amplitude scale here on the audio behavior. Keyframe that there. Come to the first frame and set that to 0. So that's sort of gradually increasing as the track goes along, and we're going to do the same kind of thing with the other element because we want to start with more or less a straight line. But this time I think I'm going to come to 4 seconds, so end of bar 1, and click the scale button for the audio phase down here, and come to the first frame and set that to 0. And what I just need to do in order to get that beginning point to be a flat line is to just uncheck that audio amplitude. I actually don't need to, but I'll just show you that it's added to the existing default amplitude. So we need to set the default amplitude to 0, and then when we turn the audio behavior back on again, it's using 0 as its benchmark. And we sort of gradually pick up the rhythm like that. So the other thing I want to do with this replicator before I move on, make it a little bit more complicated, is to keyframe its scale. So let's come down to the Y scale here, and at 8 seconds, at the end of bar 2, I'm going to click on the Y scale, and I'm also going to click on the Y scale randomness, and then I'm going to come back to the start and set both of those down to 0. And it'll gradually grow up like that. So now we can duplicate this replicator and start building up the overall effect. So right-click, duplicate. The first thing I want to do is to create some little bright points along the bottom of the line, and I'm going to do that with this second replicator. Now what I want to do is I want to remove both of those behaviors, because we don't want to be over-processing this audio, and if you ever wanted to swap it out, it makes it a lot more complicated. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to link those. I won't do that just yet, because I just want to set up this element. So let's just turn off the original layer so we can work out what we're doing with this one. So I'm going to come to the point at which we keyframed the maximum size, because we need to have that much, much smaller. So let's experiment with a Y scale of maybe 5 and a Y scale randomness of 5. That's maybe a little bit too small. Let's go for 10. I think that's probably going to be better. So those will gradually increase to that size. And I think what I'm going to do is increase the X scale to 40. So they're bigger and fatter. And to this I'm going to apply color levels, and I also actually want to apply blur, Gaussian blur, and just change the order of those. I should have done it the other way around. So I'm going to set a value of 8 for the Gaussian blur, and I'm also going to reduce the mix value to 50. And then I'm going to take the RGB there and just increase that a lot so we get much, much brighter result. Might even increase that blur amount. Let's go for 16. Yes, that. So I want these to kind of have a little bit of a glow effect. And so using that blur with a mix value of 50% kind of gives you a sort of instant glow that's pretty effective. And what I also want to do is to set both of these replicators blend modes to add. We'll be adding in a background later on. So let me just turn on the first replicator. We can see the result together. So now what we need to do is we need to link the phase and the amplitude of this second replicator to the first one. So let's come to the replicator. Let's link the phase first. So right click, add parameter behavior link, and drag that replicator in there. It's automatically found the value that we want to link to. And then we can do the same with the amplitude. So right click, add parameter behavior, link, and drag the replicator in there. So now that's looking like that. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this one because I want it to be a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to right click, duplicate, and obviously it's kept all those links to that original audio behavior, and that's going to be handy for us. So what I just want to do here is I just want to increase the scale. So again, I'm going to come to that 8-second keyframe point, and let's try a Y scale of 10 and a Y randomness of 15. And then I'm just going to reduce the X scale down to 25. So the effect of that is it just makes it a little bit more interesting. And what we might even do with this one is to change the random seed like that. So again, it's different from the one we've just copied. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that first replicator. Actually, I'm not going to do that because then we'd have to relink it. I'm going to take this latest replicator here, right click, duplicate. And what I want to do with this is I want to have the elements going downwards. So basically I need to match the scale of this first replicator. So we had 100% on Y and 200% Y randomness. So let's just match that up here. So 100%, and this was 200%. So let's just take off the levels and the Gaussian blur for this. And we also need to do is just to flip the angle. So I'm going to set that to 180. So now these are going down. Obviously, again, we want to just click on the random seed so we get something distinctly different. I'm going to go with that. Now, I don't actually want these to be quite as long. So although I've matched those values, I think I might just reduce them. So the Y scale, I think I'm going to go for 50 and randomness of 100. And what I'm also going to do is going to take it, and we don't actually want it to start, I think, until maybe, I don't know, let's try 8 seconds. Because what's going to make this all work is if we phase the different elements. So with that layer selected and at 8 seconds, select mark and move selected in point, and that just moves the start of that replicator to 8 seconds, and it starts to grow down at that point like that. And also with this one, I think I'll make it a little bit more faint. So if we come to properties and just set the opacity down to maybe 50, and it just gives us a little bit of sort of variation from the other element. So I'm not going to spend too much time just sort of finessing all of this. I think one of the things, I think probably that first replicator, it just grows a little bit too fast. So let's actually come to the keyframe editor. So I'm going to right click on that, show keyframe editor to get that value there. I'm going to come to, I think, 12 seconds, and then just click the keyframe button there, go back to this one and hit the delete keyframe button there. So it just grows more slowly, and just maybe not make it so large. So again, on that keyframe, let's set that down to 50 so they don't grow quite so tall eventually. I think that's going to be better. So I quickly want to drop in a background. So I'm going to make a new group, move that to the back, and then I'm going to just add a color solid, I think, just for convenience. Add that in there, and then just make it very dark. So it's like 3% of that blue there. And I also want to come to this main group here and just set its blend mode to add. Okay, one other element that I want to add is some particles. So I'm going to create a new group, and I'm going to take my element there. I'm going to, actually it's put it in that new group because it can live in there just as well. I'm going to make an emitter out of it. So object make particles. So let's set this up. Let's set the shape to rectangle, arrangement to random fill. Let's set the width to 1920 and the height to 100. So then I just want to increase the speed, I think. Let's go for 250, speed randomness of 100. What else do we want to do? We want to just affect the scale. So let's come down to the scale, open that up, set the X scale to 35 and the Y scale to 2. So we've just got little dots now. And I want to scoot back up to the top here and set the emission angle to 90, so they go upwards, and the emission range to 0, so they only go directly upwards. So if we turn off the other group, you'll see we've got particles flying upwards like that, and that's jolly nice. I think I'm just going to have fewer of them, so set the birth rate to 15. And then we can duplicate that, right-click, duplicate, and we want some going down as well, so let's just change that emission angle to 270. But again, let's not have those come in till, say, 16 seconds in or something, just so we've got some nice variation. So I'm going to come to 16 seconds on the timeline, and I'm going to hit I on the keyboard, and now they'll only start emitting at that point. And let's turn that other group back on again. So now we can actually put that particles group into the main group like so, and we can add some effects to the main group. And what I would simply do is I would come down to Hawaii Superglow, and already it's looking great. And what I might do here is just, let's have a mix value here for the colorize of 0.75, and then we can change up our colors here. So I'm going to have that cyan for the central color, and let's make the outer color blue. And immediately it's looking so much more effective. And you get the idea. So if you don't want to buy Hawaii Superglow, but I strongly recommend that you do, let's delete that. What we could do is we could select this group and we could make a clone of it. We could then add a blur, Gaussian blur, and let's set the Gaussian blur to be something like 16, and the mix value of that to 50, and then duplicate that Gaussian blur, set it up to 32, set the mix value down to 40, duplicate again, set the amount to 64, reduce that again to 30. You get the idea. So we're just building up this Gaussian blur till we get some. I'm going to jump to 256 with this next one. So we get something like that, and then we actually want to add a color levels, and then we can just punch it up like so. So we're getting a kind of a glow there, and we could actually colorize that by coming to filters, colorize. Maybe put that down below the levels, and we can pick our color here. That's quite nice like that. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'm not really going to spend a lot more time on this. The only thing I'll point out is that what we could do at the end here, so at 26 seconds, it basically, the track ends, and obviously we want our effect to die down. So what we can do is that we can come to our main replicator, the one with the behaviors on it, and we can keyframe those two scale values down. So I'm going to set a scale keyframe for both of those at 26, and I'm going to come to the end and set them both down to 0. So now the whole thing will calm down. What we'd probably also want to do is just shrink everything down, and there are various different ways in which to do that. I think probably the simplest is to come to, again, let's come to 26 seconds, again with this replicator selected, the main one. Let's come to scale, keyframe the Y scale, come to the end, set that to 0, and then what we can do is we can just link the other scale values to that one. So add parameter behavior to the Y of the next one and add that, and just do that with each of them. So just linking that to the main scale value there. And let's do that with the last one here, link it, add parameter behavior, link to our main scale here. And now everything is just going to gradually shrink down like so. But finally, there's just one very small styling detail that I want to talk about. I'm not entirely happy with the way these cellular elements look in these long strands. So what I'm going to do is, I'm looking at these downwards ones. I'm going to come to Filters, Stylize, and I'm going to look for circles. I'm just going to reduce that value down to 6. And if I turn that on and off, you can see that's now sort of turned them into sort of more discrete kind of particles, as it were. And we can also just add a color levels, and we can increase the white value and crunch down the black as well, so that we kind of separate them out a lot more. So I select both of those and bypass them. You can see we've got a much more interesting effect. So we could actually copy those, select both of those, Command C, and paste them onto the up version as well. And it's just, I think, they just look a little bit more like particles and less like sort of rectangles of that cellular element. So that's really the project. You can have lots of fun with adapting it into all sorts of different ways, but I hope that's given you sort of the basics of the idea. So thanks very much indeed for watching, and I hope to see you again another time.